I think we can get. I think we can get started.
Can get started?
Yes.
Okay, 1 second. All right. Awesome. So hi everyone. My name is Unnati and I work with Kelp HR. I am the product head for DEI and EAP. And DEI is Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and EAP is Employee Assistance Program. Today we are here to, so I have a very dear psychologist who I know very well. She's going to take us through understanding and dealing with guilt, and especially, I mean, it's not only for women, but I think everybody in general, there's a lot of guilt that we tend to feel for various different roles we play. And especially being a working person, a working mother, and even for women, I think there's a lot of guilt that sets in for certain choices that we make and certain dreams that we have. So today we're here to kind of understand and discuss more about that. So for that, I have Dr. Miloni Sanghvi Vakil, who is with us, and she's going to take this webinar and take us through this entire process. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to introduce her to you, everybody here. Miloni has a bachelor's and a master's and a doctorate in psychology, and she's done that from London. And she has her registration with the Health and Care Professionals Council, that's HCPC, which is in UK. She has worked with a lot of different settings, and she's worked with a lot of different people. She's lived in Belgium, UK, and India, so she has been fortunate to work with a lot of different cultures. And she also has worked a lot in the profession of guilt and uses different modalities. So couple of modalities in therapy that she uses are CBT, there is compassion focus therapy, there is psychodynamic approaches. So she works with a wide, very range of clients. One of her main focal points has been, young adults, and she's somebody who tends to work with a lot in that age group. So I'm going to kind of quickly pass on the baton to Miloni and tell her to take us through this entire process. And we will have a round a little bit at the end for questions. So please, if there are any questions, please feel free to put that in the chat. And at the end, we'll try and take as many questions as possible. But over to you, Miloni.
All right. Thank you so much, Unnati, for that extensive and very kind introduction. And good afternoon to everyone who has joined in today. Thank you for joining in. I believe we're all here for a reason to understand, to unpack working women's guilt, whether it's for ourselves or someone we're close to and we want to help them. So thank you so much. And having said that, I'm really excited to be presenting this topic today because it is something that I too have experienced in my professional journey and along life's different milestones. So just to give you a little insight as to where I'm at, as Unnati mentioned, I was abroad in Europe and I came into India in 2020, started working in 2020 as soon as I sort of moved. And only recently did I decide to take a break, not just for health reasons, but also because I did sort of identify that there was some aspect of this guilt playing a role as well. And so I've been on a clinical break myself. And in fact, I am stepping back into my work shoes with this presentation, with resuming work with this presentation. So it's very, very special to me. Now, I do want to mention that this is a vast topic, and with the time that we have today, I will touch upon some of the themes and try focus in on a few areas. So I do already admit that I won't be able to cover everything, but I will also try to sort of take your inputs and work with those. And I do want to make room for discussion for your experiences as well. So I do have a presentation, which I will start with and try to present for around 40 minutes or so. And then we can open up the room to discussion. Few housekeeping rules for the presentation. Please do keep your mics off, as I see that all of you are doing. It just helps minimize the disturbances and disruptions. Feel free to keep your videos on. It's nice to see faces, and it's always lovely to see your expressions as we're going through these, but there's no pressure. Thank you, Mansi, I see you. And yeah, so if you feel comfortable, confident, hi, Tara. Hi, so I'm just trying to say a word. Subhashini, am I saying it right? Subhashini? All right, well, it's lovely to see those videos come up, and hello to all of you. Now, you can respond to the questions I asked in the chat box while I'm presenting, and then once the presentation is over, we can open up the floor and have more of a verbal dialogue. Now, I acknowledge that this is a sensitive theme and can be very sensitive for many. So we are an open platform here. Do share only as much as you feel comfortable, and let's create a safe space here, a respectful space towards our own feelings as well as others, whatever we share here today. So that's what I wanted to start with. And before we get started with the agenda, actually, I'll just put up my presentation. Hold on. So we see, just give me a moment. I'm going to share my screen. Always the technology bit that gets to me, but almost got it. All right. Okay, so here we are. I believe we can see the presentation now. We're looking at navigating guilt in the working woman's world. And again, I'm Dr. Miloni Sanghvi Vakil, and here's my email address in case you did want to reach out to me after the webinar. Now, just quickly to scan over the agenda, we'll be identifying and exploring the emotions associated with guilt. We'll be recognizing instances of guilt stemming from a woman's career-driven pursuits, and here's where you can chip in. We'll unpack the challenges that occur in balancing our professional responsibilities with our other roles. We'll look at effective strategies to process guilt healthily, and we'll understand ways to support ourselves as well as other women experiencing guilt. And having said that, I am just going to, here we go, the next slide. Before we discuss guilt, I want to just take a step back and have an activity to dive into our emotions. So what I'm going to do is read out narrate 4 scenarios, and I want you to think about how you would feel in that scenario. Now, remember, there are no right or wrong answers, and any responses, opinions, ideas you have will be depending on your personal experiences, your background, your sort of historical experiences. So again, just being respectful of different things that come through, I just want you to think about how you would feel. And once I've read out the scenario, I've narrated the scenario, please just in the chat box respond how you would feel. So the first scenario is, your sibling has taken your vehicle for their plan with friends without asking you, and you actually needed the vehicle for a task. How do you feel? Do share how you feel in the chat box. How would you feel? Your sibling has taken your vehicle for their leisure plan without asking you, and you actually need it for a task. Okay, so we've got upset. Annoyed, absolutely. Okay, a lot of annoyance here, frustrated. Yeah, at least ask before taking. That sounds like I'm annoyed, I'm irritated. Yeah, irritated, there we go. So feeling taken granted for, absolutely. Irritated as you're feeling taken granted for. Even if I need, also I'll look for another way, absolutely. So we're hearing a lot of anger, irritation, where what I'm seeing in your responses is that there's this kind of negative emotion we feel towards the other, this unpleasantness. We're not liking what has just happened. Okay, so thank you for sharing that. Now, the second scenario, your family member or friend has gifted you something as a gesture to say thank you for helping them through a difficult situation. How do you feel? How would you feel? Your family member or friend has gifted you something as a gesture to say thank you for helping them through a difficult situation. You're feeling appreciated, happy, on top of the world. You're feeling grateful, happy, lots of happiness, lots of positive emotion. You're feeling appreciated, validated, overwhelmed, choked, little embarrassed. Yeah, you're not used to perhaps so much kindness. Or it may feel a bit too much, brings a smile, you feel touched. Absolutely. We're talking about a lot of positive emotion, validation as well. Yes, positive emotion towards our friends or family member, because we're feeling acknowledged, we're feeling seen or heard or appreciated. Okay, thank you for those lovely responses. Now, third scenario, you're invited to a friend's birthday party. Some people have brought gifts, others haven't. You haven't brought a gift either. How do you feel in this scenario? If you've gone to a friend's birthday party, some people have brought gifts, others haven't. You get there and you realize some people have brought gifts, but you don't have one on you for your friend. How are you feeling? You're feeling embarrassed, very sad, upset, awkward, embarrassed. Absolutely fine about it. Hey, that's fine. Embarrassed, awkward. So we're starting to see guilty. Yes, we have guilt here. Anxious, awkward, lots of upset. So still I feel good because I'm important for her. There you go. You showed up. That's enough. And so I think we're starting to see the nuances in emotions, that in a similar scenario, different people can feel different things. So thank you for sharing that. And okay, one last scenario for you. You have taken your siblings' vehicle for a plan with your friends, thinking they always say, okay, they always say, fine, take it. How do you feel when they tell you they actually needed the vehicle? Okay, we're feeling guilty. Oops. Yes, oops, we made a mistake. We're feeling guilty. Okay. Yes, so we don't feel great about this action that we've taken, this action that we've committed. We're feeling apologetic. Okay, guilty, but we'll try to arrange something for them as well. So we'll try to have some form of compensation. Thank you for those answers. So I wanted to, I'm still, yes, I've got my screen on. I wanted to do this activity for two reasons. One is, first of all, to get our emotional selves warmed up. You've just come into the webinar and you might have other thoughts going on. So I wanted our emotional selves warmed up, thinking about the different emotions we may feel. And the second one is to depict what we saw in that third and fourth scenario more so, which is that we have our subjective experiences and we can feel different things in relation to a similar event. So many of you in that gift scenario, for example, many of you said, oh, I feel awkward, I feel guilty, I should have brought it. Others said, hey, I'm absolutely fine with this. And this is something we see with guilt as well. So speaking about guilt, again, thank you for your answers here. Moving on and speaking about guilt, let's start unpacking guilt. The first thing we want to know about this experience, emotional experience, is that guilt is a normal human experience. We all feel it to some extent. And how do we define guilt? Well, guilt is a feeling of remorse or sadness about an action that is believed to cause harm or is unethical or causes a negative outcome, or we feel we should have done something. So in one's view, we feel that it is, in simple terms, bad, will create a negative outcome, or is believed to cause harm. Now, I mentioned that guilt is a normal human experience. It's okay to experience a little bit, but it becomes problematic when we experience excessive amounts of guilt. It becomes all-consuming and interferes with our daily living. Now, what we start to do or observe in ourselves when we feel guilty is we feel distressed, we start feeling self-conscious, almost like at that party, start thinking about, oh my gosh, what are they going to think? What are they going to say? I should have brought that gift. There's a focus on the self if we're feeling guilty. There's this discomfort. And And there's negative self judgment or focus. Emotions related to guilt are sadness, regret, anger, remorse, nervousness, fear, to name a few. You might have others you want to add here. But for this reason, I say guilt is not just one emotion, but rather it is a complex, layered emotional experience that we have. So I might refer to guilt as an emotion, but remember, it is layered. It has multiple complexities and layers to it. Now, when we talk about guilt, it's never really talked about in a positive way, and that's because guilt does affect our well-being, both mentally and negatively. Starting with the mental, we experience internal conflict, resulting in behaviors such as withdrawal, lack of confidence, losing hope, becoming apologetic or submissive, and even difficulty concentrating. And the physical effects of guilt are similar to the physiological symptoms we see in anxiety or sadness. There's a weakening of the body, immune system, insomnia, so issues with sleep, gut and digestion issues, muscle tension buildup, fatigue. None of this sounds great. And if we are experiencing guilt chronically over prolonged periods, it can even result in life-threatening illnesses or conditions. So it is something that we do want to process, we do want to tackle, we do want to unpack. One last thing I want to mention about guilt before moving on to the next slide is that we can experience guilt at a conscious level. So we may be aware of the fact that we are feeling guilt towards something or about something, but it can also be sitting at a subconscious level. We haven't really identified that we're feeling guilty, but we may feel a sense of discomfort, a sense of misalignment. So that's just one thing to be aware of as well. Moving on to the next slide, just mentioning a little more about guilt. It's helpful to categorize it into these three categories: reactive, anticipatory, and existential guilt. Now, reactive guilt, as the name suggests, is a reaction to something. So when something has taken place and we feel guilty as a consequence. So let's say you've been working, you've been going to office as usual, and a family member tells you that you should have really attended the family gathering on the Tuesday afternoon. You're told that and you feel guilty. So that's reactive guilt. Something passed, you weren't there, you felt bad about it. Then there's anticipatory guilt. Again, as the name suggests, it's guilt in anticipation. So guilt experienced when the choice you have made is going to have a negative outcome, or you feel bad about the thing that is going to happen. It's the knowledge of this thing going to take place. For example, anticipatory guilt may be not being able to make it to your child or your niece or your nephew's match or play at school because you have an important client meeting at office. And so that's an example of anticipatory guilt. Then there's this guilt we don't hear much of, but it's existential guilt. And contrary to reactive and anticipatory guilt, it's actually a healthy version of guilt, existential guilt. If we think about the idea of existential guilt, it's a kind of dynamic, an experience that propels us into creating a healthy life and into fulfilling our potential. So it may involve us taking responsibility for things, but this existential guilt also tells us that we can forgive ourselves. We're not perfect, and there are times we're not going to be able to do everything, and that's okay. That's, again, inherent to the human condition, that we can't be everywhere all at once, even if we want to be. Okay. Moving on to the next slide before I put that up. Now that we have understood more about guilt, let's move on to our beautiful working women, bringing in this next slide. Oh, okay. So I'm just going to read out this excerpt of Priya, who is a working woman. So Priya is a dedicated working mother in Andheri, Mumbai. She kisses her child goodbye and sets off for her corporate job every morning. And a familiar pang of guilt takes over as she does this. She wonders if she's spending enough time with her child, providing the attention they deserve. While at work, managing projects and attending meetings, she continuously ponders if she's striking the right balance between her professional aspirations and her role as a mother and wife. Balancing career and family responsibilities can make you feel guilty, questioning whether you're doing enough for your family, your parents, husband, children, fur babies. I have a dog and I have definitely felt dog mom guilt. I may add more to that later. But this kind of guilt is so common amongst working women. So I want to ask the audience, like Priya, in what ways have you felt guilty because of your professional commitments? And if not you, how have you seen other women feel guilty because of professional commitments? Please do jot them in the chat box. Now, as I do wait for your answers, I will share my experience here that when I did move to India, I started working full time, and there was a part of me that felt like I wasn't doing enough at home. I was thriving at work, working 10 to 12 hours a day, doing well, getting good feedback, but something was lacking, something at home. Felt like I wasn't engaged enough. So I have some answers now. Thank you for sharing. So we have constantly feeling apologetic, thinking on a daily basis, same guilt on a daily basis, feeling it many times, guilty traveling for many days on end when a kid was a toddler, not being able to dedicate enough time for oneself in self-care, spending less time with your family members or loved ones. Guilt is quite common there, ignoring important milestones of children. Also having a fur baby, whenever leaving for a job, can see that he becomes upset. Yes, they are very attached, bless them. And feeling tired, not spending enough time with child, not enough time for self-care, time with friends, family. So I'm seeing a lot of answers pour in that, as we see, we all feel guilty in many ways. And this is the kind of guilt that we want to talk about, we want to process together. There's also juggling the lives, the roles. How do we do that? Trying to do household work as much as possible, but sometimes if you get late, as we do, we feel guilty we weren't able to do that aspect. Again, similar answers, if not enough time for child or household work. So absolutely, I can hear there's so much going on for us, that there's the split between the office, the home setting, the dynamics at home with the children, with the family members, with the parents, the fur babies, and with oneself. There's just not enough time. So thank you for sharing these. Now, I want to put this quick statistic up. We have seen the female labor force participation rate across India from 2012 to 2022 be quite similar. This is from Statista. I did corroborate these rates with other sources as well, and they suggest that there's been a slight increase in the movement of the female labor force sort of growing. There's been an upward movement, which is positive news. However, most of the sources stated that the rates of the female labor force participation sit around between 25 to 30%. Which is less than half the percentage that we have, half the percentage of working women, female labor force that we have. So it goes to show that there's still much work to be done to support women in the workforce. And this is from a title from Wall Street Journal that says, India is behind on the curve on women in the workforce. So countries like Japan, USA, China even have seen a steeper increase of women in the workforce. Now, again, from the Wall Street Journal, economists say that India's low figures with women in the workforce are because of two main factors. One is weak job creation. So there's a lot of competition for the same jobs. But more importantly, to our discussion today, economists argue that there's still a deeply conservative culture that emphasizes that a woman's place is at home. And whilst we're seeing that changing, there's still much work to be done, I believe. So we have society that says, be feminine, get married, or raise a family, or get married and raise a family, rather. Know how to cook and do household chores. Know how to cook for your husband is what we always, well, quite often hear, cook for your husband and children, and perhaps your in-laws. Always act like a lady. Be nice and apologetic. Be docile. Be quiet. Don't be too loud or bold. Have an ideal body type. We're told to, we're often, told comments about our bodies. Hey, you've gained weight. Hey, you've put on weight. Is everything okay? You've become too skinny. We hear there's a lot of pressure on women to be a certain way. And it's important to identify that we live in a culture involved with patriarchal societal expectations. And in this structure, men tend to be the breadwinners, and women are still responsible for families' well-beings. It's ingrained in us since we've had generations of this. We've seen the men typically be the breadwinners and women look out for families' well-beings. And we've sort of tended to measure a man's success by how well he does at his job or how much he's earning. And with women, how well the children are doing, how well the family is, how healthy they're keeping. Now, I do want to say that this is changing, but we do have a lot of these societal expectations ingrained in us. And even though we are seeing the changes with women taking up leadership positions, being in corporate settings, it does come with a cost of feeling guilty of going against these expectations and not feeling like our decisions are easily accepted. I have a comment here saying how that women are actually dealing with many jobs at the same time, and absolutely we'll come to that as well. Now, I think that nicely sets us up for the next slide, is that the roles a woman takes on. She is a mother, often a primary caregiver, the primary parent in the child's life, involved in the child's life, ensuring they are nourished, coordinating their school, tuition classes, checking up on their well-being, how are they doing with their friends, liaising with individuals such as teachers, tutors, additional classes, the wife taking care of partner's needs, husband's needs, planning for the family, planning ahead, scheduling appointments, managing social life as well. You know, the dinners you go to, the social events that you participate in. You're a daughter or a daughter-in-law that is looking after the parents, the older generation, maintaining healthy relationships. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this or experienced it, but I definitely have a sense of, I don't know if your husband will be able to make it, but you should come, which kind of gets to you like, hey, I'm working as well. Why is he off the hook? But that's, again, a bias that the society holds. So just being aware of that, mindful of that. And of course, as the homemaker, the home manager, which I believe, having both a mother and a mother-in-law who beautifully manage the homes, that they're taking on a full-time job with meal planning, cooking, laundry, cleaning, managing help, ensuring the house is kept tidy, house repairs, maintenance, it just keeps on going. And then finally, once I catch my breath, a dedicated employee. So there's so much going on. Absolutely, we're seeing that you say one is doing so many jobs, parallelly mental traffic throughout the day. Absolutely, managing so much. We build on cognitive load and it gets a lot. So are there any roles I failed to mention? What roles are you currently playing, juggling? I've gotten some of them. Some of you have mentioned kids, so I take it that you're invested mums. You've mentioned Labrador, so dog mums, but what other roles are you playing? Now I'm definitely going to add to the chat in saying, I definitely play a dog mom role. I've got daughter, we've got elder daughter, so feeling more responsible, co-sister, caregivers to senior citizen parents. So there's so much about care here. And whilst we're taking on these practical corporate jobs in these settings, or whatever profession you're in, taking on these roles, we have this carer role that we take on. Caregiver to a parent and daughter, caring for your friend, absolutely. So thank you for sharing those and for your inputs. Spending time with senior citizens, absolutely. Now there's this term that's come in recently around mom guilt, and it's being discussed quite a bit on social media platforms. I've sort of picked this off of Momwell, and I'll give her the credit for it, an Instagram account from Toronto. And here's a quick succinct graphic on how a mom can feel like she's failing as a working mom just because society might have expectations from her. So there's the duality of being a fantastic employee and being a perfect parent. There might be lack of policies that make mothering and working nearly impossible. Hearing others tell the mother that they should be home with their child or they should be doing something a certain way, that can be a very, very challenging for mothers, especially when they're in such vulnerable, fragile states, trying to figure out motherhood. And telling mothers that motherhood should fulfill them and be enough, that the role of a mom is enough, that doesn't feel right. And also, society may have unrealistic expectations of the load that moms can carry, that they have to do it all, which is practically impossible. So just talking about it feels exhausting. But of course, it's imbued with guilt that we feel here. And moms may feel failure of not being able to take care of the child, may feel guilty for prioritizing their career, even if they needn't feel that way. So we've talked a lot about guilt and how women, we play different roles. We try to balance our professional selves with our personal lives, taking on carer roles. And I see this beautiful addition to the chat, animal rescuer, another beautiful carer role that you take on. But we feel a lot of guilt trying to do so or not managing to do everything. And we really do spread ourselves thin a lot of times. So I want to move on to more of the strategies and talking about how can we work through some of this guilt. So first thing I want to mention is let's manage our expectations, because a lot of this guilt is coming from expectations from others as well as from ourselves. So there are a few things that I've listed here that we have to accept and work with. And I will go through each of these points with every slide. So let's go on to the first one. Let's accept that time is finite and we only have 24 hours in the day. I sure wish we had more to be able to do many more things that I'd love to do. And I'm certain that many of you would say the same. But let's start with becoming aware of the idea that time is finite. We have 24 hours in the day, and let's become aware of how we are utilizing our day, because often we don't have a sense of where the time is going, how we're utilizing our time. So I've put in a simple pie chart here to kind of break down what a day might look like, where you have the largest chunk of your day at work, the most important thing in our lives, sleep, a large chunk of that dedicated to sleep. There might be cooking as a responsibility, as a duty, there may not. Eating, again, another crucial one we need up there, eating your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then whatever other tasks or actions that you have, the commute to work, for example, family time, time for TV, house chores, so on. As you see, there's not a lot. I wish that there was much more that I could put up there. And I don't think I've mentioned the time on social media platforms, which could go up to half an hour even. So just becoming aware of how we're using our time. I'd actually recommend this activity to all of you. Break down your time, see how you're using it, and go from what does my day currently look like to building an idea of what do I want my day to look like? how do I want to break it down? And this second one isn't necessarily what your day is going to look like, but engage in this activity to see what things you would like to change. And I've just used this example where I've gotten rid of the commute, thinking maybe I'll work less, fewer hours and work from home. How does that work? Maybe I'll have more time with the family, or even have me time for self-care. Now, it's not always a possibility to cut down the work time, but let's at least try get close to what do I want my day to look like. And this is just one example, but I did actually participate in this activity for myself. This is what my days looked like, a typical day before my clinical break, where I was working way too many hours, I feel, for my own good. And that was one of the reasons why I had to slow down and cut back. I was getting sleep, but not enough. I noticed I was spending a lot of time watching TV, more than I would have liked to, because it just helped me wind down from a very busy day. There were some house chores there. I wasn't actually spending too much time eating. I was eating my meals very quickly, spending time on social media, a little bit of exercise, walking my dog Rancho, and a little bit of socializing. But once I took my break and tried to reconstruct my day, this is what it looks like today. I still have some clinical work, such as this workshop, which I'm very happy doing. There's some room for that. Much improved sleep. There's time for family, for TV, which is reduced actually, house chores, more time for eating, more time for exercise and walking with my dog, and socializing and social media. So this is just an example of how we can start becoming aware of what's going on for us. And even think about, what are the shifts I want to create? It may not be perfect, but let's make that start. And just to demonstrate, again, the point I'm trying to put in here is that time is finite. And if I wanted my ideal day, I would need 31 hours in a day to have a somewhat ideal day, which includes time for baking and crafting, which includes a little bit of commute where I'd like to go to work maybe 1 or 2 days a week and not be completely work from home. So just to demonstrate again and hone in the point that time is finite, and with the choices we make, there is an opportunity cost. So we have to prioritize some things, knowing that there is an opportunity cost. We may be taking away time for other things, and that's okay. We can't do it all. Then there is the second point: we choose some responsibilities and others may be handed. What do I mean by this? Well, first of all, we want to reflect. Where is the expectation coming from? And I'll break this down for us. You may want to capture the screen once I'm done explaining it. But we have expectations that are both external and internal. Expectations that are told to us or that come from the society, things like, oh, you should have been there, or this is what you should be doing, or this is what a daughter-in-law should be doing, this is what a wife should be doing. External expectations that come from society, community, different groups, whether it's your workspace, whether it's a religious group or your housing complex, for instance, your friends, your family. External expectations are expectations that are not from within yourself, but from someone from the outside. And then we have the internal expectations we hold for ourselves, our own biases, our assumptions. Now, I'll give you an example here. I'm just trying to conjure up one. The internal expectation I held is that there had to be homemade food on the dinner table, served on the dinner table every day. And I felt that I was the one responsible doing that, providing that for my husband, until I had this conversation with him. And he told me that he'd actually lived in the States for 10 years and he was very happy ordering in or having a tiffin some days of the week. So I was feeling guilty about something, an expectation I held for myself, which actually didn't have a negative outcome as I thought it would. And moving on to responsibilities. So from our expectations, We then assume certain responsibilities. We think we are dutiful. We hold these responsibilities. And I break them down into real and actual responsibilities that we hold versus perceived and assumed. Just as I had said, I had assumed that there was this expectation and it was my responsibility to provide, whereas that wasn't actually the case. So it's really important to have conversations with your loved ones. It's really important to think through what are the actual real responsibilities here. Now, for those of you who have mentioned that you have children, yes, bringing up children is a responsibility that we take on as parents. Bringing up fur babies as well, a responsibility that we take on as parents. And it's thinking about how do we fulfill those responsibilities. It may not be that you have to be present at all times, but you ensuring that their needs are met in some way or the other. So it's all about conversing with your loved ones, with yourselves, about how much you can provide, where that limit is, and what else you can put in place to make sure that others' needs are also taken care of, as well as your own. So don't forget that a responsibility you have, a real responsibility you have, is self-care and caring for your own needs as well, not neglecting those. So build your awareness around your true responsibilities through communication and clarity. If I tell you how many times I've seen these expectations get to someone and it hasn't actually translated into a responsibility, they just feel, this woman just feels she has to do this. Another reason, what's coming to mind, another reason why I felt I needed to have these homemade meals prepared and served on the dinner table is because I saw my mom's doing that. I saw them providing, and that was the internal framework, the internal template, and the bias I held. So break down these biases, break down these assumptions, and truly understand where these expectations are coming from. Okay. And I'm just aware of time, so I'm just going to keep plowing through, and then we can open up the room for discussion. Things may not always seem fair. There are differences in family setups, agreements between family members, work environments, mindsets of family members, and so on. So let's build acceptance that, yes, you're right, things are not always fair. Understand, accept the givens. You may be in a family setup or structure where you have specific responsibilities. Think about, well, let's first of all accept that, and how do we cater to this? Another area for acceptance is knowing that that aunt or that uncle is going to make that snarky comment, is going to say something that makes us feel guilty, but just accepting that that's their framework and not yours, and we don't need to internalize that. Another one around building acceptance is be more mindful and live in the present moment. In Priya's example earlier, as well as with everything you guys have shared, we see that we often tend to feel guilty at different times in the day, whether it is reactive guilt about something that has happened, or anticipatory guilt, or just a kind of looming guilt related to both of these. So here's the practical advice. It's, you have made a decision, go with it. If you are at work, be mindful at work. Live in the present moment. Know that perhaps you're feeling that guilt in that short-term period, but you have made this decision for some sort of benefit, some sort of advantage in the future. So knowing your intention allows you to be more mindful, do the thing, the task at hand. So live in the present moment. Avoid comparisons. This is one thing all of us psychologists say. It just makes you feel inferior. It makes you feel like you're not doing good enough. You might see someone, let's say a colleague, who's able to be at her workplace for hours and fully engage in that, but we don't know what she's going on. She might have an entire support network at home taking care of the kids, and she maybe has to check in once, or wants to check in once for her kids. She may not be in the same situation as you. So avoid comparisons, because I would say 99.9% of the time we start feeling inferior because of these comparisons. And the final one, very, very important in combating guilt, is cultivate gratitude. I heard many of you say not being able to spend time with the people that you love, but how about being grateful for the time you do have with them? How about giving it a voice, sharing that with them, writing about it, having that conversation? Cultivate gratitude. When we shift to that positive mindset, we are actively combating that guilt. And be compassionate, develop compassion for yourself. Learn to be easy on yourself, to forgive yourself, to know you can't do it all. I have a comment here saying most of the guilt are felt due to comparisons. Each of us are on our own path. Life is not a race. Absolutely. As we saw, emotions are subjective. Our own lives and experiences are subjective. I would say there's no point in comparing, because it is, as the adage goes, you're comparing apples to oranges. So please do become mindful if you are comparing, and just stop it there, cut it out there. Final one, which I'm quickly going to browse over, is just remember, we will not be able to please everyone and do everything. So understand your own values, what is important to you. You may value your family, but you also do have a value of creating financial stability, or one of your values is being hardworking, having ambition. So know your own values, and let's learn to align ourselves with our true selves, with what our values are. Prioritize. You may be in a situation where you need to work right now, or where you do have the space to work. Just reflect on your intentionality. What are my intentions in taking these actions? Now, I showed you 2 pie charts, which were very, very distinct. The one of my own experience, one when I was working full-time, and one of more recently where I don't take on so much clinical work. And you see that they are the same person at 2 different periods in life. So just remember, your actions are not permanent. You make your decisions for what you think is going to be helpful now. So reflect on your intentions. Be confident in your choices. What appears reasonable, what appears logical, and feels right. Remember that gut feeling is really important. And I just want to say, others may criticize this. Again, we live with patriarchal societal norms. We live with multiple generations. You may get criticism around this, but be confident in the choices, knowing that you are trying to prioritize, you're trying to align yourself, and you're trying to be intentional. And finally, whether it's with your partner, your parents, your friends, your children, communicate what you're doing, what your day is like, what your intentions are with your loved ones. Hopefully they will understand, some will, and others won't. So expect that. So finally, I just want to sum up with saying it's not just about overcoming guilt or kind of brushing it off our shoulders, but it's about understanding what your guilty feelings are trying to communicate with you. And I said finally, but there's one last bit which is really important, that sometimes the guilt feels just too heavy. As you see, this lady's trying to stay afloat, but we might just need our little diver friend to come help us. So seek support. Do not isolate yourself when you're feeling consumed by guilt. Speak to a close friend or a loved one who will understand your distress. Speak to someone going through a similar experience, or someone who has experienced what you are in the past. It can be really helpful to not just release and relieve yourself of these emotions, but also just to have that understanding can be very validating. Again, seek professional help if you think this would be helpful with mental health practitioner. And see if you can talk to your employer and discuss what arrangements can be made by the company to better support you. Whether it means hiring a mental health practitioner, offering flexible work hours, work from home days, arranging transport accommodation so that you feel safe and perhaps your family members feel safe, arranging creche facilities for children. These are ideas that are fairly new, but we're seeing that they're increasingly coming into the culture. So do start the discussions around these. And the focus is to grow from here and ask yourselves, what do you need to help you navigate ahead? So Quick example, JCB hired psychologists to visit its factories in India, in part to counsel female employees on how to handle family pressure. So we're seeing these changes come in, and it's beautiful to see the support that women are getting. And yes, this is the end, I promise. Do ask yourselves, what is my guilt trying to tell me? And what do I need to do or change to feel more aligned? So yes, find your balance. There is no right or no wrong. You are not expected to do a certain thing a certain way. Understand your own values, your own priorities, and yes, find your balance. So I will end there.
Awesome.
I think we're okay for time. I did try to rush that last bit.
No, we're good. We're really genuinely good. I'm going to open up, I think first I'm going to open up the space for a couple of questions. So we have a couple of minutes. So if there is anybody who wants to ask a question to Miloni, this is a great time. So I'm going to keep that open for a bit.
Yes, and I've done a lot of talking. So if any of you want to chip in, I'm very happy to hear from you now. Okay, I think we've had Swapnil raise his hand. Do you want to go ahead, Swapnil? Or perhaps it's a high five, I'm not sure.
I'm guessing that it's the latter, so.
All right.
Any questions, anybody? So
Can I?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Miloni. First of all, thank you. It was a wonderful session. There was a lot of points that you touched, which which we could relate to, but could not identify at the beginning of the session. What I would really like to know is that how or what are the first steps or the small steps that you take to overcome guilt? Because there are a lot of ways in which you can do that, but what is it that one thing we need to do, or maybe like how you say, one step at a time? So how do you start? How do you initiate that whole thing?
Okay. Fantastic question there, Sona, and thanks for asking that. So I think I use this philosophy as a broad kind of philosophy, which is first identify. It's about awareness before taking any action, right? And even in what you asked, how do we identify? What's that first step we take? One example might be break down your guilt. Is it reactive? Is it anticipatory? Are we even feeling hints of existential guilt that is saying, hey, get off your butt and do something, right? Or, find alignment. So identify which kind of guilt it is. The other awareness activity we had here was create that pie chart, for instance, see what's actually going on in a more real sense, right? Because we often have a skewed sense of time, as we do with other things, a skewed sense of emotion, a skewed sense of time. So let's actually have something more concrete that shows us what's going on. Yeah, so I would say that first step that we take is identify, let's build awareness.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course, you're very welcome.
Is there anybody
Hello?
else? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Meghna. I also have one more thing to share, as well as, would like to hear some thoughts about it. So there are times when I don't feel like overcoming. I mean, I clearly don't want to overcome a certain type of guilt, because that guilt would help me feel accountable, and also over the period of time, it makes me feel like I have to feel guilty about it, because someday I might be able to, for example, like not giving the same amount of emotional support or some other thing that you're receiving. So that time I would not want to overcome. I would definitely feel guilty about it, but I would not want to overcome that guilt and feel okay or find anything that would navigate that guilt at that point of time. And I want to feel guilty, and so that, like I said, I want to feel accountable, and then someday I would be able to correct it, because if I get over it, then I might not be able to, correct it in the future.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Meghna. And I think you make a very important point here is that we stay within this guilt a lot of times. It's familiar. We like to have it close because it propels us into some action. It keeps us accountable. Now, there's a longer answer to this, which is sort of a therapeutic approach where you shift from feeling guilty to feeling resourceful and encouraged, where you're doing the same actions, you're still accountable, but you're not feeling guilty. The point I want to make here, the short answer is, remember, guilt is a heavy emotion that does have a negative impact on us, right? So yes, it's we may want to keep it close. It may seem comfortable to keep that guilt close to us because it's familiar. And I say familiar because maybe it's worth looking back. You know, when did I first start feeling guilty? Was it because somebody made me feel guilty and then I started taking action, and then that sort of strategy worked? So then I took on guilt, took that action again, kept that guilt close to me. So maybe it's worth identifying when that guilt actually started, and have we developed this as a coping mechanism, an unhealthy coping mechanism to stay accountable, and think about a healthy alternative way where we can still be accountable, we can still have responsibility, but we don't need to feel the heaviness of the guilt. So remembering that being responsible and accountable is different from guilt. They need not come together, and we can detach them. We can still be accountable and do the things that we set out to do without having the heaviness of the guilt. Does that start to begin, kind of start to answer your question, Meghna? I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, it takes a lot more work to not feel like a bad person and still do whatever we plan to do.
Yeah. And as you say that, gosh, I just had this pang of guilt, thinking about, the scenarios I've experienced where someone's like, oh, you didn't come to lunch on Tuesday afternoon. And thinking, but I have sessions then, you don't ask my husband why he didn't come on a Tuesday afternoon, or, but you should really eat more meals at home. And it's like, you don't know my life. Don't make me feel guilty, right? You just kind of feel defensive, but at the same time, you needn't be. When you're confident in what you're doing, you don't need the guilt to guide you.
Thank you so much.
If I may go on, I just have one quick thing.
Mhm.
I don't know whether it's an allegation or it's a social construct that has built up that, working women, because working moms, because they tend to spend not so much time with their kids, lavish them with gifts, or, promise many things, or take them to malls and all these things. And that's one reason why it's a kind of spoiling the children is a notion. Okay, I have heard people saying that also. So communication is the key, is what you said, to overcome the guilt, to probably talk to the husband or the other family members. But kids, as you take it, they wouldn't be able to understand why mom's so busy. Or there'll be very few kids to understand why mom's busy. So in which case, as it is, there's a guilt that, not spending so much time with them. And they, above that, the allegation that we are lavishing gifts because we are not able to spend money. How do we tackle that?
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And absolutely, kids may not have the emotional maturity, depending on the age we're talking as well, may not have the emotional maturity to understand either the constructs or the idea that mom goes to work. And more often than not, we see homemakers be women rather than men. So children may even come in saying, this one's mom stays at home, or she's always around. That can also make you feel guilty. In this case, think about this. Are you able to remember something that your parents have told you when you were maybe 5 or 6 years old? Do you remember, a key thing that they said? I imagine many of us have memories. So you may say it now and they may not understand it, but maybe 20 years down the line, they know mom said this to me. When they're in similar shoes, they understand that. And we can get creative about this, right? This is a fantastic topic you bring up, Usha. You can get creative about this. You can write what you're feeling. You can write maybe letters to your children and hand them to them when they're older, saying, this is what I have been feeling. Kids may not get it right away. They are going to say tantrums. Kids are very unfiltered and say things to your face that hurt, that make you feel guilty, but you know you're doing your best. And this is where that self-care and that confidence and that self-alignment really plays a role, knowing that you are doing your best and that's okay. And that can forgiving ourselves, that I'm not going to be able to do everything. That's something you might write to your children as well, which they can process at a later point.
Need not be harsh on ourselves is what you're saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. Developing compassion, which I think Unnati knows very well, is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So if there's perhaps enough of an audience there, we can discuss this theme as well, having a webinar on that. But I think, do we want to squeeze in one more question, Unnati?
I think we can squeeze in one more. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll let you pick. I think we have a few. So if you can pick one.
I think I'm going to take Tanushrie's question because I think Swapnil's question was kind of covered in the whole thing. So I'm going to take, so her question is, most of the guilt that we feel or is felt by our loved ones, how can we deal with that? I mean, I think it comes from the loved ones. So how does one deal with that?
So great question. And I think a lot of us can resonate with this, in that we feel a lot of that pressure, a lot of that expectation, and then a lot of that guilt because of what comes from the outside. Now, the easy answer is don't absorb it. Don't internalize it, but it's much easier said than done. It takes a lot of processing, a lot of talking through. This is where something like therapy can come play a role, where you speak to your therapist about the different pressures you're feeling. But speaking about dealing with the expectations from the outside, here's where the external and internal play a role. We have to develop a system internally that is intact, that is validating enough, that is caring enough, that is forgiving, that is compassionate, that helps build a sort of buffer. If you think about a nice kind of mattress protecting you, that if something hits you, it doesn't hurt you. There's a buffer in between. And that's what we want to work on building. Now, how you do that, whether it's through conversations, whether it's through therapy, whether it's through seeking support from women of that community, of that particular community who are experiencing similar things, it's building that sense of confidence, that sense of grounding, that sense of internal validation and control that can help us combat that.
Absolutely. I think there are a couple of questions, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So I am going to have to stop. But before I kind of stop, I just want to say, Miloni, thank you so much for doing this, because I think this is, it's a topic that is a really deep topic. And, while you were even discussing this today, I mean, for me, a huge takeaway was about the alignment piece and building that internal system, because I think we often, or very often, we tend to forget to give ourselves that reality check. And we can get so spiraled in, comparison and what's going on outside of us, that we tend to not look within, because we're not used to that mechanism. We've not been taught that mechanism. So I just want to say thank you for bringing that, because that's a huge takeaway from me. But extremely, there's been a lot of insights, a lot of questions, and I'm feeling really bad not picking up all the questions. But thank you for this wonderful webinar. And yes, we can hopefully do another one on the similar lines, or more in depth as well, because I think there's a lot more in this topic, and 1 hour is not a justification to this topic, but we'll come back with that for sure. So I just want to say thank you again, Miloni. It was lovely as usual. And awesome. Thank you, everybody, for even being here, everybody who's taken the time and, heard Miloni. And hopefully everyone's had some takeaway, because it was a lovely presentation. And hope everybody can find their way through this piece of guilt. So thank you. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Thank you and take care. I'll sign off now.
Yes, thank you.